So today I'm going to be making a lecture on conditional statements. I made one on Python, but of course I wanted to make one on Java. So also the second thing I should say that I wanted to mention was I will be connecting the concepts of constructors and methods with the conditional statements that we'll be doing today. So if you guys want to review the constructors and methods lecture that I made previously, feel free to do that before we actually dive deep into this code. But really what I'm going to be doing again is connecting the concepts of constructors and creating those constructors and methods and then implementing those if and else statements. So feel free to check that video out before coming to this one. But if you've already done that, great. And then also if you just want to dive deep into this code, let's just get into it. So the first thing we want to do is to declare our instance variables. So all we do is say private int jack, and then we can say private double Jimmy, and then private, let's say another int value. So private int of Jason, for example. You can name these whatever you want, but just randomly those names came to mind. So after we've done that, so we can get rid of this comment, we always want to create, since we're creating an object, we also want to create our default constructor here. So the way we do that is public opt-in k, and then the parameter variables I pass into this constructor here, this default constructor, is what I will pass into my object. So I will be passing in all of these values really, so I can just say int of Jack, double of Jimmy, int of Jason. So I'll be passing all of those or really all of my instance variables as values into my object, as I'm doing that in my constructor here. So since we are using the exact same names, we just have to make them implicit parameters. So we just say this.jack equals Jack, this.jimmy equals Jimmy, and then this.jason equals Jason. Perfect. We have our instance variables, we have our constructor. So let's get rid of this comment. So it's going to go below here. The next comment I have is we will then implement our get method. So keep that in mind. We're going to be now implementing our get method, and this is where we will also create our conditional statements. So that's where I will apply the if and else statements in order to get a certain output value, and then we can say Jack was the instance variable that I set, right? So in other words, if this was a pretty long comment, I will be creating my get method, and then within that get method I will be applying those if and else statements and then returning really Jack. So I'll be returning Jack as the value that I want in my main method eventually when I pass in, for example, Jason and Jimmy inside those if statements. So how will that look like? So let's do it. I will do public, and then since I will be returning Jack, I will need to make my get method an int, right? Because Jack is an integer. So we will say public int of get value, and you can name your get method whatever you want, but just for simplicity we'll just say get value. Okay, and then braces. All right, so this is where we actually put our if statements. So how will our if statements look like? How will we allocate that? So simply, of course, since it's an if statement, we just say if, and then since if is a conditional statement, we need to put a condition. So this is where we put a parentheses, and then since we are returning Jack, I need to say, for example, I need to set Jimmy or Jason to a condition. So since Jimmy is a double, if we want it to be a positive value, for example, we can set Jimmy is greater than 0. So Jimmy greater than 0 is just saying as a condition if Jimmy is positive. So if Jimmy is positive, okay. So you saw here what I did. I actually I hit the return key, and then I put a brace here. And then what's cool about IntelliJ IDEA is that after you put a brace under the if statement and then you hit return, it automatically will put a brace below that. So you don't need to really worry about formatting too much there. So again, I was here, and then I want to do a little bit of a twist. I want to create a nested if statement. So what I'm doing here now with nested if statement, don't worry, that doesn't sound really scary as it is. I will be actually just writing another if statement here. So I have an if statement here. Instead of actually saying return, or setting Jack to something or return Jack, I will be saying if Jason, and Jason is an int, if Jason is also greater than 0, then we can say Jack is, let's say, plus or equals 70. We can just say that. So again, the way I did this here, or the way I really created my if statements, was I set one condition, which was Jimmy. Jimmy is greater than 0, is saying that as long as Jimmy is positive, and as long as Jason is greater than 0, which just means as long as Jason is positive, then Jack is equal to really plus 70, or Jack is equal to Jack plus 70. So we just add 70 to Jack. So again, just kind of a quick recap here. I set two conditions here, and really what a nested if statement is that you're basically using two or more if statements. So you're saying that as long as this is true and as long as this is true, then we get that. So that is our output after these two things are true. If one of them wasn't true, then Jack would not be this. We wouldn't have that as our output. So keep that in mind. As long as this is true and as long as this is true, then we get Jack is added to 70. So keep that in mind. Okay, and the last thing we need to do is, since this is a get method, we need to put a return statement. And since I wanted to return Jack here, right, I said Jack is equal to, or Jack is equal to 70 plus itself, really, because this is a compound operator. I want to return Jack, right? So we say return Jack. Perfect. So we have everything in place. We have our get value, which is our method here. We have our conditional statements, two of them, which are nested. One is nested inside another. Last thing we need to do is, since we have, again, all of this here, we have our really constructor, we're all ready to create our main method, and within that, our object. So all we do is public static, let me bring this down here, public static void main is string args braces. Okay, so the first thing we need to do in our main method is to create our object, and our object was named opt-in-k. So I will say, and when you create an object, you literally use the same name as your class here. So literally we just use that name from verbatim. So I say opt-in-k, and then we can say or set a really name for that object. We can say Jack, or I said Jack, let's say bro. Opt-in-k bro equals new opt-in-k, and then this is where we will pass in the values for our instance variables. So I want you guys to see the analogy here with the default constructor. So you see here I passed in Jack, Jimmy, and Jason as parameters here, right? In our default constructor. That's exactly what I'm going to be doing inside my object here. I will be using or setting values to Jack, Jimmy, and Jason inside my object. So first thing I have integer of Jack, right? So Jack is an integer. Let's say, for example, 6. And then really cool, it recognizes that's really Jack because Jack is an integer. The next thing I have is double Jimmy. So since Jimmy is a double, I need to use a decimal place. So let's say 70.0. And then last was Jason, correct? And Jason was an int, so we say, let's just say 9. So these are all example values. You can set them to whatever you want, of course. Okay. All right, so we have that. And the last thing we need to do is, since we have our object already created, the last thing we need to do is just to print and really just return our getValue method. So the way we do that is simply system.out.println of bro.getValue. Simple as that. So system.out.print, I'm just printing out the object here, bro, and its method. So of course this object, which I named bro, has the getValue method. So what I'm doing here is that I'm really just returning the getValue method here by printing, of course, explicitly stating that I wanted to print it out. So after we have that all in place, we're ready to see what our output is. So it seems like it's already built, so let's actually run this. 76. Okay. Cool. That makes sense. So if you see here, let's go back. So just kind of a review. We said so as long as Jimmy was greater than 0, I set Jimmy to 70, right? So 70 is a positive value, and it's certainly greater than 0, so that worked. And then if Jason was also greater than 0, I said Jason was 9. So Jason was also greater than 0. So those two values were set as true. Basically, they were correct. And as long as those were correct, they worked out. Then Jack was equal to 70 plus its original value. So I said Jack was 6 as my original value, and I just added 70 to that. So 70 plus 6 is 76. And we got that out. So all that worked fine. Awesome. So basically, really with the if statements, the conditional statements, you can really create a program where you connect, concepts of constructors and methods to really, again, make a program more, I guess you can say that you can make the program a little bit more fancier or a little bit more in depth, really, than just using a main method. Really, if I wanted to, I could have just said, just set my main method and just assign Jack a value and then return. But this is really a potential of Java where you can really create and connect concepts with other ones to create a more complex but also really cool program. Of course, this was really simple for the sake of just wanted to show you guys the concept of how to do if statements and again how to connect these concepts. But really, you can again connect various concepts together and create a really much cooler program. In other words, to put it simply there. With that being said, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you guys learned more about conditional statements and how to connect them with other concepts, which was constructors and methods. And until then, I will see you guys in a future video. Thank you so much again for watching.